This is the last module of the Merchants of Marwa story, where Mudita gets insights into another important concept of the overall microeconomics jigsaw, the factors of production, from her father, Mr. Ghanshyam Agarwal. Mr. Ghanshyam introduced Mudita about operations of any firm and how the circular flow diagram concept fits in. The inner loop of the circular flow diagram represents the flows of goods and services from firms to households and of inputs for production from households to firms. The outer loop of the circular flow diagram represents the corresponding flow of dollars. Dollars flowing from households to firms in lieu of the products and services bought from firms, and from firms to households for the inputs for production given by households. The bottom half of the above diagram is the main theme of this module: the inputs from the households to firms, the dollar flow from firms to households, and the market for these transactions to happen, the market for factors of production. Mr. Ghanshyam explained that the inputs called factors are the key ingredients that the firm uses for its production and are supplied by the firms. It is said that the demand for these factors is called derived demand, as it is derived from the demand that the firm sees to its final products and services. The inputs for production were then categorized into 4 buckets: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Then the concept of MRP was explained: the additional revenue generated by employing an additional factor unit. For example, if we employ one more unit of a factor, the total revenue rises by $20. The MRP of the factor equals $20. MRP is equal to delta TR divided by delta quantity of the factor, that is, change in total revenue divided by change in quantity of the factor. MRP is equal to MR multiplied by MPP, marginal revenue multiplied by marginal physical product. Then it was established that the MRP curve is the firm's factor demand curve. It was indicated that this curve is a downward sloping curve, in line with the law of diminishing marginal returns. The concept of value marginal product, VMP, was then introduced before getting into examples. VMP is equal to P multiplied by MPP. A firm wants to know the VMP of a factor because it helps in deciding how many units of the factor to hire. The VMP of a factor is a dollar measure of how much an additional unit of the factor will do for you. Then it was discussed that in perfect competition markets, VMP is equal to MRP as P is equal to MR, and that in other markets this is not the case. Another concept of MFC, marginal factor cost, was introduced as follows: MFC is equal to change in total costs divided by change in quantity of the factor. For a firm that is a price taker, the marginal factor cost MFC curve, the firm's factor supply curve, would be horizontal, flat, or perfectly elastic, as shown in exhibit. In general, a firm would continue buying additional units of the factor until the additional revenue generated by employing an additional factor unit is equal to the additional cost incurred by employing an additional factor unit. So, firm will produce output till marginal revenue product of factor is equal to the marginal factor cost. Then, labor as a factor was discussed. It was identified that labor is measured as wages, the emolument given to labor for working in the firm. The derivation of the market demand curve was considered for two firms, A and B. Shifts in the labor or generically individual factor curve was also discussed. Then the supply dynamics of labor factor were discussed, and it was discussed that it is an upward sloping curve. The equilibrium was then elaborated on as follows. Then a step-by-step framework that describes the factors that affect the wage rates was discussed. Then the next factor of production, viz. Loanable funds market, aka capital, was discussed. Loanable funds are the funds that entrepreneurs take up for setting up their businesses or for payments thereof. The cost or price of loanable funds is interest. It was discussed that the demand and supply of loanable funds are downward and upward sloping respectively. The third factor of production, viz. Land, was then touched upon. Its price is economic rent, which is a payment for the land in excess of opportunity costs. It was discussed that the supply of land is considered constant in economics and the demand is downward sloping. The last factor of production, viz. Entrepreneurship, was briefly discussed, and it was said that it is the key factor that mobilizes other factors and generates output. It's intangible in the sense that it cannot be measured and also it cannot be quantified.